I now call to order the October 21st, 2021 regular Board of Aldermen meeting. And I would like to thank our visitors for being here, both here in chamber and viewing remotely. Please join us now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Alderman Becker.
Here.
Alderman Rucker.
Here.
Alderman Ross.
Here.
Alderman Rose. Here. Alderman Osteen.
Here.
Mayor Alvery.
Here. All right, we do have a quorum. All right, we'll start off first, as always, with Mayor's communications. And I do have something this evening. Tonight, the board is being asked to complete the Pruitt Point Tiff Economic Development Project. While the Tiff will no longer exist, the Pruitt Point Shopping Center, a very vibrant and successful retail development, will continue to provide products, jobs, and services to the residents and visitors of our community and the lake area. Over its 21 years existence, this project, which paid off 18 months ahead of schedule, has generated approximately $75 million in new local taxes. $35 million of that was distributed when collected to the qualifying local government, and the remainder was used to pay off the associated bonds. Now, all of the sales and property tax from the Pruitt Point businesses will be distributed to pay for local government services in our communities. The 1% transportation development tax, the only new tax imposed for the development, will continue. I want to recognize tonight some of the people and entities instrumental in the Pruitt Point Tiff. First, Gary Pruitt and Andy Pruitt are here this evening. I want to applaud them for, and especially Gary, for his vision, determination, creativity, and willingness to incur a major risk. I personally refer to this development as Osage Beach's second most influencing economic development project because of the businesses in the district and the national entities it attracted that located throughout Osage Beach. I also would like to recognize the taxing districts of Miller County. Tom Wright is here tonight, the presiding commissioner of Miller County, representing those districts. And I want to thank them for their willingness to embrace an unfamiliar public financing concept. And finally, Mayor Penny Lyons for her leadership and the individual Osage Beach board members for recognizing the economic opportunities a development of this type would offer for our city's future. The Pruitt Point Tiff, I believe, is a prime example of how public financing, when properly used, successfully benefits the consumer, the community at large, and the project. Thank you. We move on now to citizens' communication. This is time set aside, back up. This is time set aside on the agenda for citizens and visitors to address the mayor and board on any topic that is not a public hearing, and there is no public hearing on tonight's agenda. For those here in person, speakers will be restricted to 3 minutes unless otherwise permitted. Minutes may not be donated or transferred from one speaker to another. Visitors attending via online will be in listen-only mode. Any questions or comments for the mayor and board may be sent to the city clerk at tberreth@osagebeach.org no later than 10 a.m. on the board meeting date, which is the first and third Thursday of each month. Submitted questions and comments may be read during the citizens' communications section of the agenda. The Board of Aldermen will not take action on any item not listed on the agenda. nor will it respond to questions, although staff may be directed to respond at a later time. The Mayor and Board of Aldermen welcome and value input from the public. Is there anyone here in person who would like to address the board? And if so, please come forward. And I believe that Mr. Purtle is here to share with us again this evening. Thank you very much. Welcome back.
Mayor. Thank you. To refresh your memories, I am Jan Purtle. I'm one of the board members for the Community Foundation of the Lake. We came and spoke to the city several months ago, and we greatly appreciate the fact that the city has given us a resolution of support for our Trails Initiative, which we now call the Magic Dragon Trails Initiative. To also refresh you on the purpose of it, what our goal is to do is to build recreational trails in our community, which would be both hard surface trails and soft surface trails, as an improvement to the quality of life for the people who live here, as well as to draw visitors to our community in stressing what we consider our off-season months. We believe that having recreational trails available to the public would bring visitors here and possibly, hopefully, give people a bit more steady stream of income during what we consider our off-season months for hotels, restaurants, everything. But we also believe that it's a family-friendly kind of improvement to our quality of life. We believe it's an increase people's health, as well as the economic benefits. We wanted to be able to see people riding and running and walking with their children and riding their bicycles on these trails. And so for the last several months, we have been raising money for our master plan, and we have had, we so far have $50,000 raised and paid into our fund for the master plan, with another $20,000 pledged to be paid, which we have no reason to believe why it won't. And then we will be hiring a professional trail design company to create at least in our first phase, hard surface trails. I've laid some maps out there. Those maps are just preliminary ideas. We have not approached specific landowners yet about those, but we will be in the very near future. But we have to have some sort of idea to present to these trail building companies as to where we would like to have these created. And most of those that are listed on there, where you see the colored trails on there, are mostly the hard surface paths. We will build what we call a spine, and the most important one we would like to have is going along Osage Beach Parkway west of the bridge. We see that as a family-friendly kind of environment where we love the strip at the dam, but we want to have something that's more family-friendly to bring people to all those businesses along Osage Beach Parkway. We would also foresee building a hard surface trail running alongside State Route KK, if we can get that done. So we're just sort of announcing to you what we're doing and where we're at on it. We're not asking you for anything now, except for just the opportunity to give you more information, possibly if we need to be on the agenda for the next time, or to come in and meet with any of you as a group, any of you personally here in City Hall, to tell you what we're needing. In order to, like I say, pursue with a master plan, we want to have at least a blessing of some sort, not a commitment, but a blessing of some sort, saying that the city likes the idea of having a trail through a paved trail somewhere along Osage Beach Parkway and out KK and maybe even up Three Seasons Road, so that we can build the parameters for our trail design company to look at and where they'd want to build it. Like I say, we're going to be meeting. They're up along KK. There's different landowners. There's some large landowners that we will be contacting to see. We're not trying to buy land from people. We're wanting people who understand the value of having trails close to their property, that it increases property values and it increases businesses, foot traffic, walking traffic, two-wheel traffic. Okay. Hey. So that's where I just wanted to update you and let you know where we are for now.
Right. Jan, thank you very much. Is there anything significant about the different colors that were used to identify the proposed trails?
Yeah, we just, since not all of them are connected, we had them set just different colors so that we could name them when we're talking about what trails they are.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And just, there's the main trail that you would see is a light blue trail running on, say, the southeast side of Osage Beach Parkway.
Right.
And it runs behind businesses because we see it as a safety issue of people trying to go across driveway after driveway after driveway. And we don't think that's safe. Another possibility of running in that area would be between Highway 54 and on the back side of the businesses on the northwest side of Osage Beach Parkway.
One thing that I would like to ask is, as you get ready to start developing that master plan, start, having selected possibly, who you want to do the job, we would certainly entertain having you come in or have them come in with you and kind of start laying out, what some of your proposals are so that the board will have a better understanding of exactly where you are and what you exactly want to do, when and where, so that we can give you the blessing that you're asking for.
Yeah, and that's very much why I'm here to make sure that all of this is working integrated, because we know nothing is going to be done without the blessing of the city.
Right.
And that we see it all as a positive thing. We want to make sure that we don't do or get ahead of ourselves in what the people in Osage Beach want.
Okay.
So that's absolutely what we're hoping to happen. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate the
All right.
update. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
All right.
Is there anyone else that would like to share with the board this evening? Seeing none, we move on. Our first item of business is the approval of the consent agenda. If the board desires, a consent agenda may be approved by a single motion. Tonight's agenda consists of the minutes of the October 7th, 2021 Board of Aldermen meeting and the October 21st, 2021 bills list. Are there any questions, comments, or proposed revisions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Alderman Morose, do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Rucker, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Our first item of unfinished business this evening is requesting a second reading by title only of ordinance number 2167, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, adopting an amendment to the zoning map of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri by rezoning 1.1 acres as described in rezoning case number 415. The first reading for all unfinished items was approved at the October 7th regular meeting. Are there any comments from the city planner?
I have nothing further, Mayor, unless there's questions.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve second reading?
Motion approved.
Alderman Ross, do I have a second? Alderman Becker, roll call, please.
Alderman Osteen?
Yes.
Alderman Ross?
Yes.
Alderman Becker?
Yes.
Alderman Rucker?
Yes.
Alderman Morose?
Yes.
All right, second reading passes. Our next item of unfinished business, request a second reading by title only of ordinance number 2168, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, adopting an amendment to the zoning map of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri by rezoning 9.3 acres as described in rezoning case number 416. Any comments from the city planner?
Nothing further, Mayor, unless somebody has questions.
All right, thank you. Are there questions from the board? With none, is there a motion to approve second reading?
Motion to approve.
Alderman Osteen, do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morose, roll call, please.
Alderman Morose?
Yes.
Alderman Osteen?
Yes.
Alderman Ross?
Yes.
Alderman Becker?
Yes.
Alderman Rucker?
Yes.
All right, second reading passes. Our next item requests a second reading by title only of ordinance number 2169, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, authorizing the expenditure of funds for the Veterans Day Parade 2021 event, support request in the amount of $2,000. Any comments from the city administrator?
No additional comments.
All right, are there any questions from the board? With none, is there a motion to approve second reading?
Motion.
Alderman Becker and second Alderman Ross. Roll call, please.
Alderman Becker?
Yes.
Alderman Rucker?
Yes.
Alderman Morose?
Yes.
Alderman Osteen?
Yes.
Alderman Ross?
Yes.
All right, second reading passes. Our next item requests a second reading by title only of ordinance number 21 71, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, adopted upon the successful completion of the Pruitt's Point Tiff project and full payment of the bonds issued therefore, terminating and dissolving the Pruitt Point Tiff Incremental Financing Plan, Special Allocation Fund, and the tax incremental financing associated therewith, and terminating the designation of the redevelopment area under said plan as a redevelopment area. Are there any comments from the city attorney or city treasurer?
Mayor, you read the gobbledygook pretty well for the legal stuff, and I think you've already set forth what happens here. We've not received any additional feedback from anybody that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you.
I guess I can add, the final principal and interest was paid on the 15th.
15th of this month? Okay, 15th of October. Thank you very much. All right, without any additional information, are there any questions from the board? With none, is there a motion to approve second reading? Alderman Osteen, do I have a second? Alderman Ross. Roll call, please.
Alderman Ross.
Yes.
Alderman Becker.
Yes.
Alderman Rucker.
Yes.
Alderman Morose.
Yes.
Alderman Osteen.
Yes.
All right, second reading passes. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I've invited the developer, Gary Pruitt, and the presiding commissioner of Miller County to be with us this evening to join in a celebration of the successful completion of this TIF. I'd like to, and what I was thinking about doing was having something like a old-time mortgage burning ceremony, but I was kind of advised that burning in the city hall is probably not a good idea. So what I thought we might do is to, have a celebration where we simply just, tear a couple of pieces of paper. So if I could get Gary Pruitt and Tom Wright to come forward and help me with this celebration.
Great idea. I like that.
It's gonna be good.
All right, let's try to just kind of hold it up so we can
Like you didn't even see.
tear it. And we'll tear on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Very good. Pretty cool.
Thank you for indulging my little bit of silliness.
It was good.
It's good.
All right. Okay. Our final unfinished business tonight requests a motion to direct staff concerning the topsider project as it pertains to odor control issues. Public Works Operations Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As previously stated, our current lift station standards do not contain guidelines pertaining to odor control. After discussing the idea and making changes that would include new rules governing odor control with other staff members, it was determined that more time was needed to ensure the changes we made were well thought out and provide an effective and cost-effective solution to odor control problems. I still intend to work with staff and to change the existing guidelines to include odor control so that future projects like topsider are required to install provisions for odor control in the future. Expect these changes at a future Board of Aldermen meeting. That said, tonight we're asking the board for direction on how to move forward with odor control as it pertains to topsider. Listed below are 4 options we are providing. Further below in the paragraph below that, there are more details concerning the ramifications of each option. Option 1 has us listed to direct the purchase and installation of the digester at the city's expense. Option 2, to accept the infrastructure when completed according to the typical Osage Beach codes and ordinances as normally, and purchase what necessary odor control equipment is deemed necessary by myself, the Public Works Operation Manager, at the city's expense. if needed in the future. This is sort of a wait-and-see approach. Option 3, to refuse acceptance of the sewer infrastructure, but direct the issuance of a certificate of occupancy when all the other provisions of the Osage Beach codes and ordinances are met. Option 4, to refuse acceptance of the sewer infrastructure at topsider until the digester is purchased and installed by the developer to the satisfaction of the city within a predetermined maximum amount of time. Direct the issuance of certificate of occupancy when all the provisions of the city code and ordinances are met. So following down, these are kind of a further explanation of the 4 options being presented here tonight. If option 1 is chosen, we recommend installing the 5.5 horsepower digester at a cost of $34,834, plus the estimated $6,000 for electrical installation from MMG McIntyre Management Group, as was discussed on our last board meeting. The quote for this is attached to page 50 in your packet, just a couple pages back. If option 2 is chosen, the sewer department would monitor the odor issues at topsider. This is the wait and see as the other buildings are erected and begin occupancy. If odor issues arise, the sewer department will try to eliminate problems found through less expensive options using the repair and maintenance account. Then if conditions are such that a digester is required, we would come back to the board and get approval for the purchase at a later date. If option 3 is chosen, the board would be required to waive the requirements of the city acceptance of the sewer station detailed in section 3 sewerage design in the Osage Beach guidelines. In practice and through design guidelines, the city has always accepted, in past precedents, has always accepted all sewer stations to be built by the city code and ordinances. So as long as they're built to our designs, we've always accepted them. If this option is chosen, the developer would be responsible for ongoing maintenance and upkeep of the station and not the city. And as well as any odor control issues that may arise as well, obviously. If option 4 is chosen, the developer would bear the cost of the installation of the odor control equipment up front. Since there is no code or ordinances that requires this currently, this equipment, that requires this equipment, such a direction would have to come from the Board of Aldermen. In past situations where ordinance changes have been proposed in the middle of an ongoing project, the city thus far has never enforced such changes for those ongoing projects. That said, our consulting engineer has stated that this is a common practice in other cities. I can read the city administrator comments if you follow me along. The applicable department managers and other staff have worked together to break down the specific issue and provide the Board of Aldermen with options handling this current in-process developer application while continuing to work on new proposed standards, which, as I mentioned, will be forthcoming, which once adopted by the Board of Aldermen, we will apply to all new future developments in the future so we don't run into this loggerheads that we have today. So any questions about the 4 options presented in the packet?
All right, thank you. The request is for direction to staff. So we'll start with comments from the board. Yes, Alderman Osteen.
Kevin, as the head of our Public Works Department, of the 4 options presented, what would you recommend we proceed with?
In a perfect world, I'd choose option 3 because I reject the narrative that this should even be a public station. That's a bridge too far for our conversation here today. So I would revert back to option 2, a wait and see. That's a phased approach where we're neither, we're obviously not forcing it on the developer. We're not incurring the cost up front ourselves. And about option 2, there are other options. The option I presented was the absolute creme de la creme belt and suspenders approach to odor control. We have other tools in the toolbox for odor control, and they're smaller, they're less expensive. Some options are as low as $200. What's going to happen there? Again, we'll wait and see. Maybe in one building, when one building's up, we get through a year, we can find that an aerator is going to be enough. A small aerator can be as little as $200. There's mixer options. Again, we've got tools in our toolbox that we could apply to this as we do all over the system currently. So for that reason, and just for expediency, I would take the wait and see approach.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
To
Other comments from the board? Yes, Alderman Rucker.
I have a real difficult problem with requiring additional cost, I guess really what it comes down to, after the contractor has turned in their specs or turned in their plans and everything. I've dealt in this area for the better part of my career with contractors coming in and saying, okay, we're going to build this structure. How do we build it? And we give them the rules. And then, so I have a problem with changing the rules after they've come into us. I don't have any problems with changing the rules moving forward, but I have a problem changing the rules because when they come in and they say, how do you want me to do it? They got all that cost that they've got to figure all out and turn it into so many dollars per square inch or square foot or whatever. And so that's my problem with, at this stage, this development came to us some time ago, said, what are the rules? And here, so now we have found that there are some rules that need to be changed. I understand that, but I have a problem imposing that on them. The fact that they're willing to do some things that they really don't have to do by maybe making some accommodations if it's needed, I think that's more than great for what they're doing. But I have a problem with imposing it on this project. Now, I shouldn't say this project. This project has multiple buildings. I don't know how many of the buildings in there have been permitted. Just one, and there's going to be more than one building, right? So I don't have any problem with the fact of us making some changes, and then other buildings within this project, they have to incur that cost. But with the building that they have permitted and requested permitted for, I have a problem with imposing additional expense on them.
Just for clarity, this particular lift station that's being discussed will service all of the buildings, not just one of them. So keeping that in mind, that may make a difference on your last comment. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. Anyone else? Alderman Ross.
Yeah, so Kevin, a couple of things. One, we have other condominium projects in this
Certainly.
city that are similar in some ways. And from what I understand, they tend to be designed in a similar fashion. They go to the lowest point, which tends to be down by the lake. They collect all the sewer effluent from the entire project, and then it gets pumped out. And so at the end of the day, do we have any history, whether it's Ledges or I think Mystic Bay or Indian Point, and I'm probably missing a couple, Parkview, out here, the towers, where we've had consistent odor problems with condominiums that have been basically designed similar ways?
Not that I'm aware of. This is one is, unique. It's also the first one I've seen. To answer your question, no. Ledges, no. There are probably another handful of them out there that are similar, maybe a little smaller, but similar, certainly similar in scope and size, that we don't have any current issues with. That said, there's also a level of get used to itness here in some of these stations, where they're just kind of taking it for granted. That said, to answer your question, I think there are other projects similar to this one currently existing where we are not doing any odor control.
Right. But we do have a system in PubWorks where we should be able to demonstrate if we've got any kind of history or significant number of requests, work orders, and so forth where odor have been an issue. So over time, those kinds of things can help us to determine whether or not a particular size of a project, holding tank, whatever the case may be. And I'm not looking for that report tonight by any means, don't know that I'll need it in the future, but I would think that package that we purchased years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, would help give us the science and the data to determine where we do need and don't need these. I'll be honest with you, a week ago, I was probably leaning more towards, we need the last thing I want to see is us have to pay for something that we think is going to be a problem, okay? That should have been taken care of. But at the same time, we really don't have any data or any history to demonstrate that we have any reason to believe there will be a problem, other than we might. Okay, and so given the fact, along with Kevin's concerns and some others, I think along the way, and after talking with Kevin and Ron and Carrie and Gino on this, to make sure that I think I had all the right information, I tend to agree with number 2. Because there's no real, we can't demonstrate a need to have this, number 1, and number 2, we would be changing course in the middle of the stream, and that's never a good idea. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? All right, I guess the next question is, what is the pleasure of the board? Staff has asked for direction. Do I have a motion which will provide that direction? Alderman Ross.
I make a motion that the direction be option number 2.
All right. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Alderman Osteen. All right, any further discussion? Yes, Alderman Rucker.
Since I don't have the information that Kevin has been reading there, could you summarize item 2 again for me?
Sure. Again, number 2 is to accept the infrastructure when completed according to Osage Beach codes and ordinances, and purchase what necessary odor control equipment is deemed necessary by myself at the city's expense should it be needed in the future. And again, a little juxtaposition on number 2 is, if option 2 is chosen, the sewer department would monitor the odor issues at Topsider as it continues to be developed. If odor issues arise, the sewer department would try to eliminate any problems through less expensive options, that phased approach, which I mentioned, using repair and maintenance accounts. We wouldn't be coming to you for, big ticket items. And then if conditions are such that a digester is required, it's presumably when at full build out, we would have to come back to you with my hat in hand and ask for the whole boat, the full digester with ozone.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to get clarity on that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I believe you've got your direction.
I want to state one comment on that. At the last Board of Aldermen meeting, I did present to you a budget amendment that was directly related to this purchase. So since this purchase, unless it's known by the end of the year, I will be bringing that back to reverse that budget amendment since it was tied directly to this item.
Did
Yeah,
we pass that? Or
We did.
Okay.
Yes.
We did. It was
We did.
included in that. So, no.
No, my budget amendment was a separate ordinance.
Right, yes.
Okay.
So it'll have to be
Just
reversed.
FYI.
Correct. Thank you very much. All right, that takes care of unfinished business. We move on now to new business. Our first item of new business is a presentation, the compensation study results. Human Resource Generalist, please.
Yes, Mayor and members of the
Excuse
board.
me, 1 second. I would ask that the staff, again, I've brought this up before, and I'm talking to all staff. Last meeting, I was not able to attend because I had a computer issue. It was difficult hearing some of you. Carrie, specifically you, when you leaned back, I couldn't hear you. So I ask you, until we get our new system, like Cindy did there, please speak into the mic so that our viewing public can hear. Thank you.
Hold on 1 second. Mike, it should be all set. For when he speaks, it should come up. Sorry. Sorry, Cindy.
That's okay. Yes, Mayor and members of the board, per City Code Section 12550, pay and compensation, the city has an established classification and compensation system, and it is the policy of the city to maintain the system to assist in recruiting, retaining, and rewarding qualified employees, and shall seek this to establish the wage and salary ranges that are competitive with labor markets. The pay structure is reviewed annually, and the procedures have been in place to ensure all positions are reviewed periodically. Due to the nature of the current workforce markets and recent rapid changes, it is important to review the full classification and compensation system this year to address entry wages for all departments and the compression within the pay plan. The city has been put the pay plan in place that we currently have in 2002, and we've worked every year reviewing a fifth of the positions and the pay plan and structure, with Ed Rata, the Managing Director of Compensation Consulting with CBES. Mr. Rata will be presenting the findings and the recommendations of this year's project. We did benchmark all of the positions this year instead of a fifth of them. And Ed will join us here shortly.
Ed, can you hear us?
I hear you loud and clear. Can you
All
hear me
right.
okay?
Thank you. It's all you.
Okay, and can you see my screen as well?
We
Yep.
cannot. We can see you, but we're not, if you're sharing screen, we cannot see a shared screen yet.
How about
There we
now?
go.
I had to hit okay, sorry about that. But thank you for the nice introduction, Cindy. As she said, my name is Ed Rata. I head the compensation consulting practice for CBIZ nationally, and I've worked with the city of Osage Beach for many, many years. It's important, so Cindy kind of hinted at this, but to add a little bit of perspective to what we're seeing in the current labor market, I've been in compensation consulting for over 25 years, and this is the craziest labor market that I've seen in my career. Not only that, it's the craziest by far. We're seeing it, we're calling it the Great Resignation. There's a lot of turnover in the market, and so it's more important than ever that you ensure that compensation is market competitive today to ensure that you can attract and retain quality employees. With that said, I've prepared a number of slides. I also have joining me my colleague Haley Price. And so what I'll cover today is just a very quick introduction to CBIZ. Some of you are probably familiar with us. For those of you who aren't, just a 30-second introduction. I want to talk, really dive in and spend time talking about the scope of our analysis, what we were looking at, as well as the methodology that talks through how we looked at it, the types of data that go into our analysis, probably just as importantly, the types of data that don't go into the analysis, but how we approach this compensation and benefits analysis for the city. We'll talk about the results. So what are our findings? What do we see as we look at the data, as well as our recommendations for implementing the compensation analysis? But bold and underlined at the bottom there, it's because it's the most important. I'm here to answer your questions. So if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to interrupt. I can talk about this stuff all day long. Haley would tell you that she's seen me do it. But if I'm not talking about the things that you're interested in, or if I'm going too fast or too slow, I'm not accomplishing my mission, which is to make sure that you all are getting the information that you want. So again, open invitation to interrupt. So who is CBIZ? We are a consulting and accounting firm. We're publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, approaching $1 billion in revenue. Our national compensation consulting practice is in St. Louis. That said, we serve clients literally from coast to coast. So just today, I was talking to a client in Chicago, another one in San Jose, another one in New York, and another one in Boston. So despite being essentially in Osage Beach's backyard, again, we are the national practice. And we do a lot of work with municipalities and with other entities within the public sector. So I told you I'd be brief. That's about CBIZ. Let's talk about the scope of our analysis for the city of Osage Beach. At its core was a competitive market review of compensation at the city. So by competitive, we're talking about what are others paying? What is the competitive labor market for each of the jobs at Osage Beach? As part of that, we not only want to benchmark it and say, here's what other organizations are paying, here's what your competitors are paying for each job, But that just provides raw data. We also want to create, or in this case, update your salary structures so that Cindy and the Osage Beach team have a means of administering compensation, of making data-driven pay decisions, whether we're recruiting somebody and need to look at what is an appropriate hiring rate, looking at merit increases, promotional increases, and the like. In addition to looking at what are other organizations paying, what's the market, we also wanted to reconcile or compare actual compensation at the city and how does that stack up against the competitive labor market. I'll walk through our implementation costs. So what are things that we see as an immediate need or our immediate recommendations for adjustments, as well as overall broader plan and compensation program recommendations. Let's talk about methodology. So we started by conducting a planning meeting with Osage Beach staff. And really the goal was to talk through the project, talk through timing, deliverables, to collect a significant amount of data about this city, each of the jobs, as well as an employee census file, so specific employee by employee information. I apologize for my slides. My page down and page up are not working. My up and down are not working, so I have a touchy mouse, so I'll try to go one at a time. As part of that initial meeting, we also confirmed the compensation philosophy as being at the 50th percentile of the market. Now that's a way of saying market competitive. And not only that, it's a very common compensation philosophy, being market competitive or being at the point where half of your competitors pay more and half pay less. In other words, we didn't design this to say, how can Osage Beach be the highest payer of any competitor for every job that you have? We didn't go to the other end of the spectrum and say, well, you know, how cheap can we throw warm bodies at problems? We looked at how do we attract and retain quality employees? How can we ensure that we're market competitive? So again, we define that as the middle of the market or the 50th percentile. So as we talk about benchmarking, you'll hear me use the term market pricing. Quite simply, that is looking at evaluation of pay. So what are other organizations paying for jobs? So this isn't something where we're looking at individuals. How much should John be paid? How much should Sally be paid? But rather, pay is defined or evaluated on a job-by-job basis. And we do that based on external data. So we're not saying, how much does the city currently pay employees? That must be right. We're removing that altogether to take an independent look and asking, what do your competitors pay for each of these jobs? And then later on, we'll bring in your actual data and run those comparisons. So market pricing or benchmarking is evaluating pay on a job-by-job basis in the competitive labor market. There are a number of key considerations as we do that. One of those key considerations is the job descriptions. We read all of Osage Beach's job descriptions to ensure that we can make appropriate matches to the market. We didn't just want to assume that your titles were accurate, reflected the market, meant the same thing to you that they mean to us. And so we're not just looking at job titles. By reading the job descriptions, we can understand the essential functions, the duties and responsibilities, qualifications, educational requirements, all of those things for each job. And that allows us to ensure that we're making those proper matches to the market data. So truly understanding the jobs as they exist at Osage and then at Osage Beach and then comparing those to the market. Then the natural question comes, well, what is the market? Are we competing with New York City and Los Angeles? Are we competing exclusively within other municipalities? How do we define the market? And the way we defined it is we looked at Osage Beach and the surrounding area. So from a geographic perspective, we were very focused, narrowly focused. And so we're not comparing to the coasts or even the St. Louis's and Kansas Cities of the world. We did kind of broaden it to start to capture Jefferson City, Columbia areas, but again, the focus was the local market. For industry, we really define that on a job-by-job basis. So some jobs, such as police officer, those are typically only found within government or municipalities, and so we would compare that within those industries. Other jobs, such as HR, IT, or finance, those can be found across a broad spectrum of employers. And so rather than limit our comparison just to other municipalities or government organizations, we compared to that broader labor market. Now, it's important to understand that comparing to one industry versus another, that doesn't necessarily mean higher pay or lower pay. It's simply a matter of how broadly or narrowly are we defining that competitive labor market or the population we're comparing to for market data. Then city population and operating budget, really we see the strongest correlation there between city manager compensation and the size of the city. And so that was a comparison for executive compensation or a consideration. In other words, we weren't comparing to much larger cities or tiny cities. To conduct that analysis, we relied on, we conducted that external market analysis and relied on external data. As a firm, we spend upwards of $100,000 a year on compensation salary survey data. And so that tends to come from major consulting firms or compensation and benefits surveying firms. It's been very statistically scrubbed and validated by those organizations. We're not using the free junk you can find on the internet, self-reported data, data from the Department of Labor. The quality controls simply don't exist in those free data sources. In fact, I would argue that those free sources are worth less than you pay for them. I wish that there was high quality free data because again, we spend a lot of money just on the data alone. And there's surveys that tend to be obsolete within a year. So I wish there were inexpensive options, but our focus is on the quality data that is very reliable. So to do that, we relied on our proprietary databases. Essentially compiles data from 1,922 different salary surveys and aggregates that data so that for any given job, we can filter that data by industry, by organizational size, and geographically. And it will ping that database to evaluate compensation based on those market parameters. In addition, we used the World at Work Total Salary Increase Budget Survey. So World at Work is kind of a new age name. Before they changed their name, well, it's probably been 15 years ago, but they were known as the American Compensation Association. So that just adds some context to who World at Work is. This Total Salary Increase Budget Survey doesn't look at compensation for specific jobs, rather it looks at trends in the market. So how much is compensation increasing from one year to the next based on geographic region and industry data as well. And so that was used to age the data. So by definition, salary survey data is backwards looking. So it is a representation of historical compensation. So we use that data from World at Work to bring, maybe one survey is 3 months old, another one is 6 months old. We want to bring those different sources to a common effective date. And so for purposes of this analysis, we reported all of the data as of January 1st, 2022. So we're adjusting it forward to the beginning of the year. And we use the factor of 3.2% annually as the anticipated growth rate, again, from that World at Work salary budget survey. We pull the data for each job in the market and report different percentiles. So I mentioned earlier that our target, our market comparison point, is that 50th percentile of the market. Again, that's where half of your competitors pay more and half pay less. But there's a distribution of pay for every job. Not every food service worker, city clerk, or police officer is paid exactly the same thing within Osage Beach, much less in the broader labor market. There's a range of pay for each job. And so we capture that by reporting data at the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile as well. That way, for any given job, we can evaluate, well, what's an estimate of appropriate entry-level pay? We may use the 25th percentile to approximate that. What's the maximum value of the job? We can use the 75th percentile to approximate that, but we can evaluate how widely dispersed is compensation or how narrowly focused is it in the market. So the point is we're not just reporting a single point of compensation, but looking at the entire spectrum of compensation in the market. We use that to create salary structures, or in this case, to update your existing salary structure. Broadly speaking, and I don't want to bore you all to death with salary structure design 101, but your structure has this V shape to it. The idea is that if the left hand of the V is our minimums or attractive entry-level pay, the midpoint represents the market 50th percentile or market competitive pay, and the maximum represents the maximum value of the job to the city. We may hire somebody into an entry-level job as with zero experience. This is their first job. They just graduated from high school and this is their first job. Well, in those entry-level roles, it may only be a matter of hours, days, or weeks before that employee is up to speed and they can perform at a fully functional level. And so we need to hire them pretty close to that market competitive rate because they can perform at that level pretty quickly. However, those entry-level jobs tend to be capped out in their compensation much sooner because the difference in value to the city between the world's best file clerk with 30 years of experience and an average file clerk with 3 years of experience, there's only so much additional value that can be brought to the city within the limited confines of that entry-level role, and so it tends to be capped out much sooner as well. As you move up the organizational chart, we see a widening of those ranges, and that simply reflects the dynamic that we may hire somebody into an executive role, and it's not going to be just a matter of hours or days before they're fully functioning. It's going to take somebody some time to get up to speed, and so there's a lot more room for growth before somebody gets to that fully market competitive point. But an executive can continue to gain knowledge, continue to gain experience, continue to bring additional value to the city within that role, and so there's a lot more room for growth within that job as well. So it's a wider range. As an aside, if you were to look at the market data, we talked earlier about the dispersion, kind of the 25th and 75th percentiles. Higher up the organizational chart, you'd see a much wider range. When you look at entry-level jobs, the difference in the competitive labor market locally is plus or minus $1 an hour, $2 an hour. There isn't a whole lot of variability, but as you move up the organizational chart, there's a lot more variability. So as I mentioned earlier, the salary structures were recalibrated to ensure that the minimums represent attractive entry-level pay. The midpoint approximates that market competitive pay point, and the maximum helps just define the upward bounds, the upward parameter for reasonable compensation within a specific job. As I mentioned here at the end, when somebody gets capped out, that file clerk in my example has been with the city for a long time. They're getting capped out. They're approaching maximum levels of compensation. That encourages an employee not to just keep doing the same thing and expect more compensation, but at some point, they should be encouraged to take on additional responsibility, to grow vertically within the organization where they can provide more value to the city, and in exchange, they may receive a pay increase as a result. So let me just take a deep breath and pause. Any questions, comments so far?
I don't see any. Ed, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. So once we created the salary structures, so again, composed of minimums, midpoints, and maximums, we then assigned each job to a grade. It's illustrated at the bottom of the screen is all sample data. It's not specific to Osage Beach. But we did so by saying which salary grade has a midpoint closest to the market value of the job. So in this case, we have job XYZ. We've benchmarked that job. We've determined that the market median for the 50th percentile is $35,455 for this job XYZ. We then would go to the salary structure and say which grade has a midpoint closest to that market value. In this case, that's grade 2 with a midpoint of $35,618. So job XYZ, not people, but the job of XYZ would be assigned to grade 2 with the associated minimum for entry-level pay and maximum for the maximum value of the job. Now, if we had another job, say job ABC, and we benchmarked that job and determined the 50th percentile was $36,000 even, that job would also go into a grade 2. And so we're using the structure to group jobs with similar market values. So we have the benchmarking data, we have the structures, we've assigned jobs to those structures in 2 grades. What do we do from there? That's when we start to look at actual employees at Osage Beach. What jobs are they assigned to? What's their actual pay? And how does that compare to the ranges? So here's a high-level overview of what that looks like. So in this chart, each dot represents a job at Osage Beach. And along the vertical axis, we have actual pay. Along the horizontal axis, we have market competitive pay. And so each of those green dots, we've simply plotted and drawn a regression line. So the green dotted line basically says if we were to draw a line that is as statistically close on average to each of those green dots as possible, what does that look like? So that's the green dashed line. So that's kind of the pay line at Osage Beach. Each of the gold dots represents the market. And so we simply replace the vertical axis. Instead of reporting actual pay at Osage Beach, we simply use the market-based salary for both axes. And so it works out because of that each of the gold dots is exactly on the gold line. That represents the market competitive pay line. So what this says, just at a 30,000-foot overview level, again, each dot is a job. We need to get into employee by employee, and we have all that analysis. But at a 30,000-foot overview, what this says is that as pay increases in the market, pay increases at Osage Beach as well. Both of them have a very similar trajectory, a similar slope. But pay at Osage Beach is, on average, across the board, a little bit below market. So we don't see a significantly flatter or steeper line. It's fairly consistent, but there's a little bit of catching up to do, again, from a 30,000-foot overview level, just looking at base salary. So as I mentioned earlier, we updated the salary structure. So these are the minimums, midpoints, and maximums for each grade. The range spreads start at 40%, and so that would be the percent difference between the minimum and the maximum is very narrow. It's 40%. That's the bottom of the V. This is kind of upside down from the V. But as you move up the organizational chart into higher compensated jobs, that range spread gets wider and wider. So it's goes from 40% up to 60% wide between the minimum and the maximum. As I mentioned earlier, so these are summary charts that I'm showing you, but we ran this analysis down to the employee by employee level of detail and essentially calculated, are there employees who are below the minimum of the proposed range? If so, our recommendation is that they be brought up to at least the minimum of the range. These are employees where you're at immediate risk for losing them based on pay. They're below entry-level pay in a market that is moving quickly. We also said, are there any employees who are above the maximum, who are above the maximum value that really can be offered within this job? As you can see here, the answer to that second piece is no. There were no employees above the maximum, but below the minimum, there were a number of people. So specifically, there were 28 employees. The total cost to bring all 28 employees up to the minimum of their grade is $43,561. That represents 1.3% of payroll. What I can tell you is, so as an outsider, I recognize money doesn't grow on trees. It's easy for me to say, hey, pay more money. 1.3% is not a huge overall cost in the grand scheme of things. Once, if I'm sitting down with a client and we get to 4%, I start to worry that this is becoming a major ordeal. So again, I understand money doesn't grow on trees. $43,000 is real money, but compared to what is typical, I guess, it's really not too bad. So those were findings. Let's talk about recommendations. So recommendation would be to bring those employees who are below the minimum up to at least the minimum of their grade. Again, that's where the $43,000 comes from. Those are employees where you're at immediate risk of potentially losing them based on pay. I'd also recommend that implementation occur uniformly across the organization. And sometimes organizations will say, can we get there over 2 years by adjusting hourly employees this year and salaried employees next year, or just this department this year and then other departments next year? It can be done that way, but I'm not a fan of it because you can end up creating some pay equity issues unintentionally. Well, we adjust all the police, and that happens to be male dominated, and so we didn't do things in an equitable fashion. So my recommendation is that it occur across the organization equally. We're also seeing, because of the fast-moving labor market, adjusting employees up to the minimum of the range, that creates salary compression. You may have an employee who is currently at the minimum. Another employee was $1,000 below the minimum, and there was a reason for that. They were hired at different time periods. They had different levels of performance, different levels of experience, those types of things. And by bringing employees, everybody up to the minimum, we can create compression or close that gap. And so my recommendation is that you consider budgeting additional dollars to alleviate that compression. Less as a market consideration, but it's one of those things that from an internal perception perspective can cause hurt feelings, can cause, when you're trying to do the right thing, but it may not be received positively by employees because they may be focused on compression. We'd recommend that on an annual basis, as the city has been doing for a number of years now, that you continue to adjust the salary structure on an annual basis. There may be years where you don't adjust the structure, and what ends up happening is you don't really save any money. You end up playing catch up later on, and the system can start to fall apart. So even if we experience rough times next year, or 6 months from now, or 10 years from now, adjusting those structures has very, very minimal cost. Looking at merit increases and those types of things, you want to make sure that you're making fiscally sound decisions. But adjusting the structures annually is simply best practice. As part of that, we're committed that as part of this project, we'll provide you with recommendations for structure adjustments as well as merit increase budgets for up to 5 years without any additional fees. And so, again, today we have the ranges, the structures, the benchmarking. Next year, that data will be out of date, and so we'll provide recommendations for making those adjustments to keep it up to date with market. And as Cindy said at the very beginning, historically, the city has gone through not this full analysis every year. In fact, it's been many, many years since we've done this, but really looking at about a fifth of your jobs every year so that on a rotational basis, every job gets looked at about every 5 years. And just one of the last bullet point is kind of a technical one, but it's an important one. So there's a lot of talk about inflation today. And while inflation, and part of it's driven by a cost of labor right now, so they kind of go hand in hand. As we look at adjusting the structures, adjusting the system, our focus isn't on cost of living or how much does it cost the city's employees to buy a gallon of gas, a loaf of bread, rent an apartment, or buy a house. Instead, our focus is from an employer's perspective. How much does it cost to hire an accountant, an accounting clerk, a police officer, a city clerk? So we're looking at purely from the cost of labor perspective. It tends to go hand in hand. If cost of living is up dramatically, the cost of labor tends to go up, but they are different measures and not exactly the same thing. So at a high level, I kind of mentioned the V-shaped structure and the recommendations, just for clarity. And again, this is sample data. So our recommendations, the way we get to the $43,000 is to look at, are there employees that fall to the left of the V? They're below attractive entry-level pay for the job that they're doing. Alternatively, and the answer for you all was no, are there some to the right where maybe we need to look at freezing pay because somebody's above the maximum of the grade? So the $43,000 implementation cost for this, that's before any compression adjustments are made or anything else, would be to bring each of the employees or each of the dots that is to the left of the V or below minimum, what does it cost just to get them up to that minimum to touch that left-hand yellow line? With that said, I'm certainly available if there are other questions, things that you'd like me to explain or dive deeper into. I'd be happy to do that.
All right, any questions or comments from the board? Alderman Ross.
So a few things. One, is this I've heard over time that we have a compensation review. What this gentleman's describing is what we have been doing. Is that correct?
Right, we have been doing a portion of the jobs periodically per the ordinance, but this is the first time, even since I've been here 19 years, that we've done all the jobs in 1 year. But he does an analysis for us every year for a section of the jobs to ensure all jobs are benchmarked at least every 5 years.
Okay, because we moved at 8% last year. There's a 12% recommendation this year. So I'm trying to figure out, it feels like we got behind is what
We did get behind, and that's why last year's was such a step up. And then we had more market stuff happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the geographic market, is that, I didn't quite hear the clarity. I heard, are we comparing Los Angeles and New York? Are we comparing just Missouri and surrounding states, or can you get a little more clear on what the geographic, quote, market is?
Yeah, did you hear that question?
Sure, I sure did. And yes, so we're looking not at Missouri and surrounding states. We're more narrowly focused than that. So we're looking at the city of Osage Beach and surrounding areas. I believe I don't recall exactly, but it was a 50-mile radius, I believe, maybe a 35-mile radius. It was it just barely captured Jefferson City, but we're more narrowly focused than that, so that St. Louis and Kansas City were outside of that zone. We were looking at the surrounding areas to Osage Beach.
Okay, and during that market analysis, because we just had something happen, of course, with the vote with the additional monies to the county. Sorry, somebody said. But
That was a
with-
cell phone.
Okay, I'm sorry. With the county and their proposed raise for their deputy sheriffs, is that proposed raise in this analysis?
Well, they didn't, yes and
Realize it
no.
hasn't been
Yes and
implemented
no,
yet.
because they're within the 50-mile radius, and we made them aware of any additional data we knew was happening in our community.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? They do a radius, but
I just
They
wonder because of
included it.
timing if it was included or not, and if we don't know, that's okay. But it's going to be significant, and it's significant impact in the law enforcement market data, I would think, eventually.
yes, and it is a significant piece, along with what Lake Ozark's paying, what Eldon's, what everybody's paying, city regardless of the job, but including that. And I know when we get into more details on Monday about how Cindy has forecasted her numbers, that includes some recommendations to address that as well as other jobs that we are finding some peaks in. Is that a fair statement, Cindy? I mean, I don't want to get into the numbers tonight, but she's considered that in her recommendation, not only to move the plan up, move everybody that's under the new floor up, address compression for everybody that's, a lot of us that's been here, whether you've been here a year or 20 years, address that compression, but also in the minimum floor still may be a little higher for such jobs that have immediate concern with our neighbors. Is that a fair general, she's forecasted with all those in mind?
I understand that part of the process. There's something very unique going on or about to go on in our law enforcement world, and I just wondered if that had been
Richard,
taken into
that
account.
evaluation is being taken into consideration. Not only do you have Camdenton, Sheriff's Department, but you also had, before that, Miller County. Okay, so,
Okay. And then the last
is
thing
that a fair statement, Cindy?
Yes, we have talked to Ed regarding the recent law enforcement taxes in the 2 counties, and they will be addressed, and we'll talk in more detail on Monday.
Yes.
Okay, and then the last thing the page, I'm sorry, which page this is on, page 70 of the packet, but the graph, Exhibit 4A. If I understand the way that things are done with medians and so forth and midpoints, this states that midpoint is what is the midpoint of, so half the people in this type of job category make more than that midpoint, and half the people make less than that midpoint. Is that correct? Is that what that's telling me?
Your competitors.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Not internally, but your competitor. This is comparing us to our competitors.
And that, to be quite honest, is a very telling graph, because what it says is even though we have in my mind at least, a highly tenured staff, we're way behind.
Majority of our.
We're in the
we were just-
75th percentile,
Yeah,
not even the
we were-
50th percentile.
That's the beauty of our backlog of compression. And, it's not that, the city has always paid attention to this, but unfortunately, financial concerns in past administration or past boards or past budgets or what, even in the last couple years, the financial constraints, just a lot of different things didn't allow us, so we are paying catch up. And that graph, exactly right. That midpoint is your true market of the job. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, less than half a dozen. I know there might be more bodies in these dots, but you have maybe on 2 hands of 100+ staff that are above the midpoint. And that's the compression we're talking about that we need to catch up.
And staff's recommendation will include that and hopefully try to address and make future recommendations for the future.
Knowing we can't address it in 1 year.
And we're going to review this again on Monday night.
Absolutely.
In
That's all I
detail.
have.
Yes, it'll be included in that. Are there any additional questions? Yes, Alderman Rucker.
This was all based on salary, and this may be something from our consultant that they can answer, but how do we get a good comparison on benefits? Because benefits is, to me, very important. I know to a lot of younger people, when I was younger, all I wanted was a paycheck. Then about midlife, I was like, hey, wait a second, I need a lot more benefits. And so, but how do we go about looking at benefits? Because that is really a tough one to compare.
I know that Ed will have an answer to this, and we actually asked that. This is not part of his review, but that can be an all-inclusive package. Cindy and I are, she does a good job at keeping track the best she can of at least our immediate surroundings. And one other thing that we are going to do is put a dollar value, although employees get a dollar value statement annually, especially now it's required by law, annually on what the value of your benefits are, but putting that into a dollar, because I think that that has to be part of the story too. Yes, we want to stay very competitive with our rates, but it's also included what is the health insurance package valued per dollar compared to, compare apples to apples, compared to what county, what is their value per dollar on that? So we are working internally without paying for an additional truly comprehensive study, because I know Ed can contest that, because we asked that. You can get that done as well, but we did not
That's very
in this
difficult
case.
to do, because I've done it years ago in my profession, and that is very difficult to do that.
It is, and every employee is going to look at different things when they evaluate, their job and how they're compensated for it. But there is a total package that is made up of benefits and salary. So I think that's one area where we try to remain competitive. We may be up in one area, we may be a little down in another, but when you put them all together and look at the total package, that makes a difference. Ed, comments from you on that question?
Yes, so as Cindy and Jenna were suggesting, so that was not part of my analysis specifically. Anecdotally, what I would suggest, as we've worked with the city for many, many years, my general sense is that the benefits, when you compare them to the private sector, are on the rich side when compared to other public sector employers, are probably pretty well aligned with market. And so it further complicates the question. So here we're looking at salary in a vacuum. And the question then becomes, well, do our benefits kind of catch us up to the market? And again, anecdotally, without looking or doing a deep dive into the data, I suspect the question or the answer is, when comparing to the private sector, it probably catches you up some. How much? I don't know. When compared to the public sector, it probably doesn't catch you up, because there tend to be rich benefits in the public sector.
Any other comments, Alderman Rucker? Any other? Yes, Alderman
I just
Osteen.
have one, and I know we're going to discuss this at Monday's meeting regarding budget for
Sure.
next year. But I thought when you really looked at the numbers and crunched them, when it comes down to the minimums, because we seem to be pretty on par with midpoints, maximums, et cetera. But in the minimums, the people that affects the most are pay grades 14, 11, and 8. Those are basically the individuals sitting right here and the ones in the back of the room. Those are the pay scales you see the biggest differentials between what we pay for minimums and what should be recommended or where they need to be. So crunch the numbers, and once again, that's who these numbers have the biggest effect on, is actually the police department and these individuals right here, your department heads. So FYI.
Well, I'm glad everyone has taken the opportunity to take a look at this. I think this is a tremendous study. This is probably, Cindy and I were talking about this earlier today, this is probably the first time in a long time where we have actually had the consultant, come in and spend some time trying to explain, to the board, the methodology and what's considered and what the recommendations are. So I think this is time well spent, and certainly very timely as we get ready to go into the budget process. Any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, Ed, thank you very much for your time this evening. We really appreciate you and the effort that you put into this study for us.
My pleasure, thank you. And if there are other questions that come up, if you want to probably route them through Cindy's, probably the easiest way. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. But
All right.
Thank you all, I appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
You too, bye-bye.
All right, moving on, our next item is a yes.
Is it valuable, this bit of information? Should we bring this with us Monday night?
If you have it, bring it. If you want me to print some color copies that's better to follow along, if that would help, let me know. I can do that.
Gentlemen, thank you all very much for your time this evening. Thanks for coming in and listening.
It's up to you. Do you want that copy, or I can get a colored copy? You tell me.
Yeah. It's like anything else. The more information you have, the better off, especially if it relates to, questions that you might have and how that relates to the budget. So, yeah, it's like anything else. Bring what you feel is appropriate, for the meeting.
Yep.
Anything else?
In that? Oh.
All right, then let's move on. Our next item is a discussion on the Industrial Drive project scope, and we have Dave Christensen with us this evening from Cochran Engineering. Dave, welcome.
So while Mike is getting his PowerPoint brought up, as you recall, several projects ago, we tried to set a new precedent as we're designing roads and doing major projects. We have asked our design team, which happens to be Cochran on many of them now, to discuss preliminary before they really head into the bidding or any major discussion. So industrial is the next big project reconstruction that's in the pavement maintenance plan. Engineering is in the works in 2021. As you noticed in your draft budget, construction is scheduled for 2022. In the original pavement maintenance plan, it was 2023, but you guys indicated to us that you wanted to keep it moving. So Dave's gonna go over the draft of the project.
Is this working? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay. Well, thanks, everyone. Okay, so yes, like Gina said tonight, I'm just going to brief you on the Industrial Drive project. The plans are pretty much at, let's just say, 90% done. Kevin has copies, so if you guys want to dive into the weeds to look at those, you're more than welcome. I'll just kind of run you through this real quick to show you what the general scope is and answer any questions. So. As you all know, the project, it's Industrial Drive from Osage Beach Parkway to the cul-de-sac. There's City Hall right next to it, so it's right down the street here. Next slide, please. And I've shown you these pictures before. We're looking southbound. You can see the road's narrow. You have the roadside ditch drainage there on the left. The road's in pretty bad shape. Next slide, please. Just showing more pictures of what it looks like. Looking southbound again, next slide, please. And another picture of it. And I think I got another picture of it. So it's in pretty bad shape. Next slide. Okay, so just the general scope of the project, we're going to install storm sewer to eliminate the dangerous roadside ditches along the road. We're gonna have concrete curb and gutter on both sides of the roadway. We cut cores out there. The existing pavement is 5 inches thick. The width is 20 feet wide, and we are going to come in with a 9-inch thick concrete pavement, 26 feet wide. There's no sidewalks on the project, and we're going to put in Cobra Head style street lighting, 7 lights. I'll show you pictures of that here in a second. So that's the general project scope. So I think go back one. I think you skipped one. So what I put in here was some examples of the sheets, the plan sheets, and again, Kevin has these. You guys are welcome to look at it, but it's just showing you the plan and profile of what we're going to do. You can see the purple. We're going back on driveways a little bit. It just shows the whole project. So I just have an example plan sheet here, plan and profile sheet. Next slide. I think the next one's a storm sewer sheet, and there's a bunch of them on each one of these. There's the storm sewer sheet, plan and profile with all the elevations on what's going in. Next slide, please. I put this in here, the traffic control plan. It's very narrow. The plan here is going to be, once construction starts, is to make it a one-way northbound the entire time. And just do it that way. We're doing a project right now in Fenton, same kind of situation exactly. And the simple answer is just go northbound the whole way. And so people can just come right around and come out right out here on the City Hall side. And what's the road down here? And also they'll be able to use, what's that road right there? Chapel Drive. So during the project, depends upon where they're at, but they'll be able to use Chapel Drive as well. But in general, it's just gonna be a one-way. Keeps it simple. We won't be turning any other way. So this sheet is our cross sections. We have a bunch of cross sections just showing what the grading is going to look like. So again, I'm just showing you guys examples of what the sheets will look like. Next slide, please. This is in your packet as well. The schedule, we're on schedule. We're here tonight to present this to you, leave the plans with you. We'll leave it here. Kevin can go through it. You guys can go through it. But I think the idea here is let's finish this process in December so that we can go out to bid and get really good pricing. I'm thinking we'll open bids in February, and that'll set us up to construct the project this summer. Next slide, please. Regarding the street lighting, I know this has been something we've talked about. What we're going to do is we're going to put in LED Cobra head style lighting. They're going to be 25 feet tall. The next slide will show kind of a picture of it. It's not very exciting, but I'll show it to you. We're going to have 7 lights at 240-foot spacing. I did do a lighting survey because we have these lights up on Collins Drive and Fenton. So just like I did before with all your other street lightings around here, I went through and here's the foot candles underneath the light. It's 8-foot candles, 30 feet from the light. It's 3-foot candles. In between, it's going to be barely anything, 0.1-foot candles. And also with these LED lights we're doing as well, there's going to be an adjustment to them. I can't remember the technical name of it, but we'll be able to adjust the lights if for some reason you think they're too bright. I was out there 2 nights ago looking at this exact same light, a little bit closer spacing, and it's going to look real good. It's going to look nice. So next slide, please. So the one on the right, that's what it's going to look like. I showed the one on the left because we're proposing to do black fiberglass poles. The one on the left's a high-pressure sodium. The one on the right's an LED. It's exactly the light I was just talking about a second ago. So next slide. I think that's it. That's kind of short and to the point on the scope of the project. So again, the plans are here in detail. I'm here to answer any questions. This is what we've been talking about all year long, this scope. So is there any questions?
Questions? Yes, Alderman Ross.
So first, I just have a couple. First of all, 9-inch thick concrete pavement, okay? Width I don't have a concern with. That seems very thick, okay? And I don't know what the cost differential is, but I mean, I've had experience with, 8-inch in front of dumpster corrals where trash trucks drive 5 to 6 days a week, and 8 to 9-inch with a good base of asphalt seems sufficient for at least 10 or 15 years now. Maybe we're solving for 50 years, but I'm trying, 9 inches of concrete, how'd you get to that point?
How did we get to that point?
Yeah, why did you?
That's based on the, there's going to be truck traffic out there, heavy truck traffic. It's an industrial type setting. Heavy trucks, we do 8 to 10 to 12, depending upon the situation and the base. Going from 8 to 9 inches is pretty much negligible. So you might as well.
No, I'm talking about asphalt versus 8 to 9 inches of asphalt.
Oh, you're talking about doing asphalt instead of concrete?
I'm not saying that you should. I just know that 8 or 9 inches of asphalt will last 15 years with a trash truck driving on it, plus other people for 10 or 15 years. I've seen it happen. So I'm just curious why we got to 9 inches of concrete, but maybe it's just a preferred standard out there in the engineering world for industrial roads. I'm just asking.
Yes, exactly. And I would look at a 50-year pavement on this one here with the concrete.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, do we expect to own and maintain these Cobra head style streetlights?
Yes.
And why do we recommend that? Because I disagree, to be quite honest.
Okay, so you can do it this way, or you can have Ameren lights.
Correct.
Yes, that's.
Okay. So what do these cost?
I think I would estimate $6,500 per light. I don't have the estimate with me. When we open the bids, we'll know for sure. I guess the answer to your question is if you want to, let's just keep going, design it this way, bid it this way. Then we'll see the exact cost, and then we'll either do if you want us to bid it as an alternate, I'll do that. If that's what the board's thinking we're gonna do, maybe pull them out.
Well, I mean, I understand that you can change that after the fact, but I guess at the end of the day, we've done this math before, 25 to 30 years before it pays back, if there's no maintenance. And I'm not convinced that we want to maintain these. So no maintenance, no damage that can't be collected from insurance and so forth. So it seems like, it could easily be said that the break even is at least 30 years to 40 years out. That just seems like, now, it may be different on these, so again, I agree that we don't know what these costs are, but I think we need to consider that before we decide who owns those lights.
So and what we'll do, and I just wrote my note, sending this, we'll bid it as an alternate. I don't want to put it included in the project because then you take it out of the project, the contractor bids it a certain way, so I'll bid it as an alternate, and then you guys will accept the base bid for sure, and then you guys will decide if you want to accept the alternate, which will be street lighting. And then you're going to know that answer to your question is exactly what those lights cost.
So the base bid will be with
everything but the streetlights.
Everything but the street. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So it's going to be exactly your question, and you guys can then decide what you want to do based on the exact numbers instead of me giving you $6,500.
Are we going to have to coordinate that with Ameren UE to see what their price is going to be and see what their construction time is going to be, so they're not coming in after we're all done and putting their lights up?
Yeah, you would have to talk to Ameren U to see where they would put their lights and when, and coordinate and have them do it during the construction, for sure.
Looks like there's quite a few power poles there they could just mount on
They
already.
could put them on the power poles.
Right.
They could, like right now, I think there's some Cobra heads hanging off the power poles. I think there's 3 of them. Are they standalone poles? They're not standalone poles, so right now they're off the power poles. You can do that, or you can put in Cobra head style lighting, Ameren UE lights, and pay those. So you can, either way.
I'd be real interested, because I tend to disagree with what Alderman Ross says. I would think it would be cheaper for us to own them and us to maintain them, rather than to have Ameren own them and us to pay them a fee and them to make profit on that. So that's what my little world says, but
Yeah.
I guess actual numbers.
What I'll do is
show.
this, is I will have my guy Gary get with Ameren UE to get them involved to see what they want to do, if it's their lighting, and then what their costs will be. So you'll have the 2 numbers compared.
But I do like your idea of bidding the project with an alternative for the lights. If I'm not mistaken, this discussion on lighting and cost of lighting and return of investment and so on and so forth was had at a previous board meeting, and I think the recommendation from your organization was that it's better to own the lights as opposed to rent the lights based on certain factors that have to be taken into consideration. So if you can get some of that information and share it with us, from Ameren, as it might possibly relate once we get the actual, costs, for these, then we can make a decision at that time. Fair enough from the board?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I will have those 2
Great.
Heinz numbers for you when the bid's open. So
All right, be great.
I think that's, any other questions?
No. Any other questions? All right, Dave, thank you very
All right,
much.
great, thank
We
you.
really appreciate
Appreciate
it.
Thank you.
Okay, ready to move on. Our next item, request a first reading of Bill Number 2173, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, amending the Osage Beach Code of Ordinances by repealing and replacing Chapter 105 Elections, Section 105030, Declaration of Candidacy, Date of Filing, Item A. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Back in June of this year, Governor Parsons signed House Bill 271, which is changing the election filing dates. It's moving it up to the 17th Tuesday prior to election and closing the 14th Tuesday prior to election, which puts it, cuts you short by about 2 weeks. So the first filing day would be December 7th, and it closes December 28th. So I recommend approval of this ordinance, so then we can go ahead and do the election ordinance next. Any questions?
Questions, comments? Alderman Rucker.
Only comment, the ordinance is correct, the blue sheet is not.
Correct.
Yeah, we
So
understand
just
that.
for those that looked at the blue sheet, it was a typo error.
Forgot to put Tuesday in. I had the 17th and the 14th, just forgot Tuesday.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve first reading?
So Motion to approve.
All right, Alderman Rucker, do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morose. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading carries. All right, our next item, requested first reading of Bill Number 2174, an ordinance establishing and providing for the election procedures to be followed for the general municipal election to be held April 5th, 2022 in the city of Osage Beach, Missouri. City Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Again, this is authorizing us to hold the general municipal election on April 5th. There are 3, each ward has 1 open, the mayor's seat open, and the city clerk's position is, our city clerk.
I was like, what?
I'm like, am I leaving? As soon as I said it, I was like, well, I guess I'm leaving. But, the city collector position is open. I recommend approval.
All right.
It's been a long day.
Are there any questions or comments? With none, is there a motion to approve first reading? Alderman Morose, do I have a second? Second. Alderman Becker, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading passes. Our next item requests a first reading of Bill Number 2174, an ordinance establishing and providing for the election procedures to be followed for the general election to be held on April 5th. Is that right? Or hold on. Okay, sorry. My computer jumped, so that didn't look right as I was reading it. All right, let's move on and go on to our next item, which is requesting both a first and second reading of Bill Number 2175, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, amending ordinance number 20.83, adopting the 2021 annual budget, transfer funds for necessary expenses for various items related to future year 2021 year-end estimate. City Administrator.
Yes, Mayor, members of the board. First, I want to apologize. This is probably the most lengthiest budget amendment I have done, but I tried to avoid doing one for each fund. So I did have an attachment that tried to give you further notes, kind of the net revenue and net expenses. So what drove this massive budget amendment is, one, our new codes. Two, there are state statutes that require funds in general, if they are going to be over, have to be amended. So we always did like a year-end one to catch that up. But it all really come from our work or staff's work in estimating their year-end. So as we work through the year-end process and they're estimating what they need for the next 3 months, plus some things that have happened since then, that's really what drove these. So between state statute, meeting our budget code on amendments that was recently amended, and two, just the department's requirements for their year-end estimates changed things, and anything that was over the 5,000 is addressed at the board level. I addressed a few, not near this many, a few ins and outs from line items on the staff side, on the administrative side. So really the in general fund, we did get the new ARPA funds, so that is a revenue one-time insurance settlement. There's just some expenditures, some ins and outs. So I'll be welcome to answer any specific question. I hope my attachment was somewhat self-sufficient on what was happening between the ins and outs of the fund, including the Tiff funds. That's something different this year. We did close out the Tiff fund, Pruitt's Point specifically, and that had enough to meet our new budget amendment ordinance for the interest and the principal. Deerberg's, the same thing there. We had an increase in sales tax and an increase in O&M. And then Arrowhead Tiff is a new Tiff because we've now started collecting the pilots per the Tiff document. So I did, based on our new ordinance, needed to amend that fund. So a couple of those that you haven't probably seen before. The other note I want to make, this does include a motion. Does include the motion request at the end of the night for the AV upgrades. When I was doing my summary sheets, I didn't calculate the right order. I know the order Tara does it in, but I just made an error in that. So the motion is at the end of the meeting, but up in general fund, there is a budget amendment under machinery and equipment that does include the Phase 2 AV upgrades that I am requesting and can explain when we get to that motion. Should that not go, or should we do something, again, we can amend that, but it is included in this request.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Alderman Morose.
It's probably a silly question, but what is clarification? Holiday pay is listed twice.
Okay, so certain departments get the benefit of holiday pay. When you have shift workers that are open 24/7, they don't get the benefit of being off work. For us that have a Monday through Friday job, we get off on a Monday holiday and get paid. Well, police department, airports, 911, dispatch, they work 24/7, so their Monday facilities close means nothing to them. So in lieu of a day, they can take a day off with pay, or they bank those hours and then just get it all at the end of the year in pay. When we estimated these for fiscal year 2021, it's when we discovered a gap in practice versus ordinance outline. And so when we budgeted 21, we had lengthy conversations last year. When we budgeted 21, we were budgeting on the way the ordinance was actually written, but it was very clear direction from the board. We didn't really have a final say in it, but it was clear from the conversations that we were going to continue practice until further conversations. So I realized when I was organizing and reconciling all the departments' requests that we needed to then budget based on practice. We are still gonna have that conversation. It's just with everything that's gone on, just kind of wasn't priority. We went on as normal practice. So I'm just catching the budget up to match practice.
Okay,
But every department will have its own line item.
thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve first reading?
Motion approved.
Alderman Ross, do I have a second? Alderman Osteen, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? First reading carries. Second reading by title only of ordinance number 2175, an ordinance of the City of Osage Beach, Missouri, amending ordinance number 20.83, adopting the 2021 annual budget, transfer of funds for necessary expenses for various items related to FY 2021 year-end estimates. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve second reading?
So moved.
Alderman Morose, do I have a second? Alderman Becker, roll call, please.
Alderman Rucker?
Yes.
Alderman Ross?
Yes.
Alderman Morose?
Yes.
Alderman Osteen?
Yes.
Alderman Becker?
Yes.
Second reading passes. Our next item is requesting a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a statement with the Camden County Emergency Management Agency agreeing to adopt and utilize Camden County's local emergency operations plan. Chief.
Mayor and members of the board, the benefit of promulgating with Camden County and the Camden County EOC, our emergency management agency, and utilizing the county's local emergency operation plan is that all the municipalities in Camden County are operating from the same plan. If we have a major disaster, we are all operating on the same guidelines. The LEOP is developed by a committee that's made up of representatives from all of the communities that it affects. We are the only municipality at this point that has not promulgated with the county. It's my recommendation that we do.
All right, thank you. Is this the plan that you all are working on right now as far as upgrading?
Yes, correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. All right, any questions or comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Alderman Rucker, do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Morose, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our final agenda item, request a motion to approve the purchase and installation of the final phase of AB upgrades in the boardroom from Morgan Music in an amount not to exceed $27,169. City Administrator.
Yes, Mayor, members of the board. So if you recall, the end of 2020, beginning of 21, we used our first set of ARPA funds to start the technological upgrades of this room because one, we've actually talked about it for many years, but COVID kind of threw us into, oh my gosh, we need to be virtual, we need to hear, we need to do all these things. So we rushed around, we did get phase one done. Michael and Ron and Mike has been brought in on this phase. I've been very instrumental because there's a lot of wiring and other stuff that just goes beyond us seeing punching some buttons. So we always knew phase two would be a good finishing of this. Monitor screens, wiring kind of behind the walls because of the way it's set up. Our speakers aren't optimal. As you can see, we have to use a second computer for Zoom, and then we have to use microphones. So it kind of brings in our full visual, full cameras, full sound. We also will do, instead of a portable projector, kind of bring that all into one system. But we also knew we hadn't budgeted for that in 2021. We weren't sure what other ARPA funds would become available, and we wanted to get settled with our new system and get live stream and YouTube and all that settled in. So we are ready to move through phase two. It isn't a budgeted item. However, there are savings in other departments, including I've not touched any of my contingency that I get. There's also this does fit into ARPA for the second round, but I know in January we will be discussing with strategies on using ARPA funds. So if it is a concern on funding right now, we can always kind of reimburse ourselves from that if you so choose. So although it sounds like a lot, it finishes the project the way it should be finished. And this room not only gets used here, but courtroom, we do a lot of trainings in this room. So it kind of finishes that whole project. So I do ask that we get to finish it this year, so we can do it more of in a slow period. So I can answer any questions, any technical questions need to be asked to Ron, I think.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments?
I have one quick
Alderman
question.
Ross.
Video, so visual, seeing something small over there ain't cutting
No.
it. So what are we gonna end up with
So
approximately?
the guy at Morgan Music has set up tons of different boardrooms and courtrooms. So we will have 4 very large screens. So if you're in this area, you're going to look on the back of those angled walls, take away the pictures, the screens will be there. If you're in the audience, your screens are gonna be that way. So it's easy, eye level, they'll all look the same, the sound, the video, no more separate computers, no more separate. So that's what the visual part will look like. A little bit of this big expense is there's no wiring behind these walls. So that's really where the harder part comes, so.
Thanks, that's all I have.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? With none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
Alderman Ross, do I have a second? Alderman Rucker? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. On to communications. We start with members of the board. Alderman Ross.
I just have one thing. I want to recognize Cindy for the amount of information and data that you brought for us to try to really explain, because we've all been wrestling for years with what, we think we're paying our people well. I'm seeing data here that says we got a bigger problem than we thought we did, and we got a bigger problem than we're even budgeting for currently. So with that said, I appreciate you bringing it forward. Thanks so much. That's all I have.
All right, Alderman Morose.
I have nothing, only to just ditto what Alderman Ross had just said. Thank you, Cindy.
Alderman Osteen.
I would just like to commend all current and past employees of the city that were involved with the TIF funding for Pruitt's Point and all their hard work and diligence over many years of dealing with that project. So they probably never thought they'd see the day that this was actually going to happen finally. So kudos.
Yeah, Carrie Bell. Anyone else besides you around when that?
Gary?
Carrie. Right, yeah.
Awesome, guys.
Yeah. There's always been a lot of question about the use of public financing, assistance, to development. And I believe that, this was a jump-off point for us. We used that as a guide, that TIF, to develop the other TIFs that we are currently in. We have improved, with the help of staff, each and every one of those future TIFs, where I think that we have really good, solid TIFs. So it's nice to see the success, and thank you for your statement. Anything else?
That's all.
All right, Alderman Becker.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Alderman Rucker.
I have nothing.
City Administrator.
Just a reminder, next week, budget, off one night, budget again. 5 o'clock, though. It's not a 6 o'clock. We have moved it to 5. Reminder. So we'll be here if you show up at 6, but please, 5 o'clock. We are going to be set up in this room with tables. I debated upstairs or downstairs, but we'll have more room, especially with the added staff because we're going through overall. So in this room, Monday, 5 o'clock. That's it.
All right, thank you. City Attorney.
I'll be there Monday.
5 o'clock?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
City Clerk.
I'll be here Monday.
Chief.
Got a couple things. Most of the staff knows that Detective Gorsline is turned in his resignation. Next Friday is his last day. He was appointed by Governor Parsons to the Camden County Public Administrator position, so he'll take that over beginning November 1st. His swearing-in ceremony is next Friday at 10 o'clock up in Judge Gilley's courtroom at Camden County, if anybody wants to make it. Then Corporal McCory and Officer Austin were here. I was hoping they'd stick around, but they didn't. Back on September 17th, they responded to a subject down unresponsive. When they got on scene, there was a nurse already doing CPR. They worked as a team, all three of them, connected the AED and was able to get the subject making a full recovery as of right now. We've got some award bars and stuff coming for them for their uniforms, but as with everything else, it's like a 4 to 6 week delay because they can't get a hold of them. So instead of waiting until that come in, I was going to recognize them tonight, but they're not here.
You should have told me that. John
so,
asked if we were recognizing anybody, and I said, no, I think they're here for the
So
presentation.
that was kind of a last minute
Oh,
discussion that me and Travis had since we had them both here already. But they did a great job on that, so.
Well, Chief, what you may want to do is you may want to invite them in for our next board meeting so that we can all thank them for, a job well done.
I'm sure they'll be here Monday night too.
Okay.
Hey, Monday.
All right. Probably not going to do it then, so you might want to invite them in for the next board meeting. All right? Anything else, Chief?
That's it.
All right, City Planner.
Yeah, I was just wondering with the new TVs if I could rent this room for the Super Bowl party. It's just kind of what I was looking at. But
You know what? That may be
way to make money.
That may be a new revenue stream.
Revenue
Yeah,
stream.
but we'll have to competitively bid it.
Competitively bid.
Right.
Clean up your
Yes.
mess.
Thanks. I knew I had to come up with something. Just want to let the board know just a little bit of the activity that we've got going on here in town. One thing that, while I can't go into specifics, and I know that you all understand that, what I will tell you is that our community is very, very popular and very, very in demand as it pertains to development, both residential, commercial, and even some industrial kind of stuff where we're looking for places to put some different things. So want the board to know that we're staying very busy speaking with these people, and there's a lot of interest and a lot of money that hopefully will go into your community over the next couple of years. So it's very exciting, and hope 2022 and the end of 2021 will be a lot of fun for everyone. So.
Some great opportunities for our community.
Yes, sir.
On some nice pieces of property. So, yeah, we look forward to that. All right, Parks Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. I want to thank Mike Welty for all of his help and support with the Fall Festival. Couldn't have done it without him because I didn't know what I was doing at first, and so I really appreciate that. I also want to thank everybody else, Chief and his cadets. They definitely got a run through with the parking, and all the staff that came out and helped and dedicated their time for the Fall Fest. I think it was a great success. We definitely have things we're going to improve on, but the other thing is we have holiday lights coming up. It'll start November 29th through December 31st. We kind of made it real simple as far as sponsorship is concerned. $75 for small lights, $150 for the medium, and $250 for large lights. So family members, businesses, we'd love to have your support at the park. That's it. Oh, one more thing. I also want to thank my staff for out there because we did a lot of things that I didn't realize that come into play. Dan Kreider, Jake, Mike, Kinsey, and Kelly. Thanks.
Very good.
Fall Festival was a great event. Had the opportunity to be out there and spend some time out there. Some changes were made at your recommendation, bounce houses and a few of those other things, utilizing one of our ball fields, which I thought worked perfectly. So, while we really do appreciate all of Mike's effort, I appreciate you as a new employee and new manager of that department, those changes and recommendations, and we look for even greater events in the future. So thank you very much. HR.
Nothing tonight. See you Monday.
Save your voice.
Yeah,
for
save your
Monday, huh?
voice. Yeah. City Treasurer.
Yes, I will briefly say thank you to this board and past boards for trusting me and my department with the finances of these TIFs. I have to admit there was a few years there where I would have lost some money betting that we would have this, and the COVID kind of put us over the top. And thank you for the trust of refunding the last bit of bonds, and the one that we did in 2012 was very helpful as well. So it's been quite an experience for me, and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Public Works Operations Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and the board. Chad Carlson, the Water Department lead, who has been with us for 4 years, has unfortunately handed his resignation. He's going to be leaving us for the private sector. Again, he's been us for 4 years, and he'll be leaving November 4th. Consequently, November 1st, we were going to get we are going to get our new hire in the water department. So for 3 days, we're at full staff in November 2021. No, but seriously, he did hang on for a little while longer for the new hire, and I want to thank him publicly for that. So I do appreciate that. Moving on to the sewer department, just quickly, they're still pushing on their sort of blitzkrieg-like inspections of the grinder stations here in town. And this is how I define success, because just this week they found 3 dead stations that have been spilling probably for years, not months. 3. They found 1 ghost station that we didn't know we had in inventory. We don't know what the number is or if it has one. And then we found 2 abandoned stations that are still powered with a panel and pumps in them and nothing connected to them. And just as a side, that will be another project of mine, because we believe there's a number of stations out there that we're paying for Ameren bills, the minimum bills for, but they're just in the weeds and we're paying the bills. So that's how I define success this week. Thank you.
Good work.
All right, good work. Building official.
I have nothing. Thank you.
Airport.
I have something, hold on, I want to say that, we're talking about the TIF. Ron started with the city the first year of construction in Pruitt's TIF. And I think he got thrown to the wolves. Here you go. Here's your first construction job. Anyway, I didn't want to leave him out.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I did not realize that. You know, that is a very well-built, development. You can tell by the remaining quality of the buildings and the lack of deterioration and that type of thing. So while we're no longer, paying off the TIF, we have a great revenue stream from that, and a lot of great services from that. And obviously, a major portion of that, comes from the work that you did early on in your career. So thank you.
Thank you.
Still here.
Airports.
Nothing for me, sir.
All right. Assistant City Administrator.
I have nothing, sir.
Oh, all right. Well, we get to go home early tonight then.
Close enough.
I know. I haven't sent anybody home.
Define early.
Yeah, well, I mean, staff gets to go home early. Most of staff gets to go home early. All right, as far as our next item, which is the executive session, I'm requesting a motion to close the meeting as allowed by RSMO section 610.021, legal action, cause of action, or litigation involving a public government body and any confidential or privileged communication between a public government body or its representatives and its attorneys. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Motion.
Alderman Rucker, do I have a second? Alderman Becker, roll call, please.
Alderman Rucker?
Yes.
Alderman Ross?
Yes.
Alderman Becker?
Yes.
Alderman Osteen?
Yes.
Alderman Morose?
Yes.
Did I hear a tone of lack of enthusiasm down on the
Yes.
left side
I
of the
guess.
dais?
I said,
Okay.
why nobody seconded? Did you get to go home?
Oh, you wanted to second it? Okay.
No, it's
All
okay.
right.
Second,
Well,
we're good to go.
the motion has been made and approved. Let's take a 5-minute break before we meet in the meeting room.
You might have been on yet. But I'm still probably I got pets that are probably dying right now.